This guy's a fucking animal. He's 18-0 with 18 knockouts.
On the guard. This crumbling again. Look at this. Back and forth they go. Short right hand from the tip. And Gvozdyk is hurt.
There's this guy, Artur Beterbiev. Beterbiev just knocked out Joe Smith Jr. for the light heavyweight title.
Another right hand. Uppercut. Big uppercut. He is stumbling. And this is over.
The arena in Riyadh held over 15,000 people, and when the final bell rang, most of them didn't know what to do. Not because the fight had been boring, because they had just watched something they didn't have easy language for. Two unbeaten Russian champions, both composed, both dangerous, both standing at the final bell. And when the judges' scorecards were read aloud, one man raised his fist and the other stood in silence, absorbing a defeat that almost didn't look like a defeat. That moment, quiet, enormous, complicated, was the culmination of a career that boxing's mainstream had spent a decade trying to look past. His name is Artur Beterbiev, and this is the story of the most dangerous man the sport almost forgot to fear. Khasavyurt is a city in the Russian Republic of Dagestan, pressed against the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, and it produces fighters the way some places produce engineers or teachers systematically, relentlessly, as a matter of cultural pride. Artur Beterbiev was born there in January of 1985, into a world where physical toughness was not a hobby, but an identity. The Soviet sports system, even in its final years, was still functioning with an almost industrial seriousness, identifying young athletes early, training them with no room for mediocrity, and building competitors who understood sacrifice before they understood celebrity. Beterbiev was placed inside that system as a boy, and what emerged was not the flashy, crowd-pleasing product that American promotional machines tend to engineer. What emerged was something rarer and more unsettling: a fighter who trained to finish people, who found no appeal in points, who viewed the knockout not as a bonus, but as the only acceptable conclusion to any fight he entered. By the time he reached international amateur competition, that mindset was already fully formed. He won gold at the 2009 World Amateur Boxing Championships. He represented Russia at the 2008 and 2012 Olympic Games. His amateur record reached approximately 250 victories. And still, when he turned professional in 2013, at the age of 28, almost nobody in the mainstream boxing world knew his name. That would change, but slower than it should have. And that gap between what Beterbiev was and what the public understood him to be, that gap, is one of the most fascinating mysteries in modern boxing. There is a number that sits at the center of everything when you talk about Artur Beterbiev, and it is the number 100, as in 100%, as in every single professional fight he has entered has ended with his opponent failing to complete the full 12 rounds upright. 18 professional fights, 18 knockouts, no decisions, no close calls on the cards, no survival performances from opponents who made it to the final bell on instinct and a good chin. Every man he faced, including world champions, including undefeated prospects, including fighters who had previously beaten elite competition, was stopped. To understand why that number is so extraordinary, consider the context. Knockouts in professional boxing, particularly at world championship level, are not the default outcome. Fighters at the top of the sport are specifically selected for their ability to absorb punishment, to survive hard nights, to dig into reserves of toughness that would break ordinary people. And yet, Beterbiev found a way to stop all of them. Not through reckless aggression, not through wild swinging, through a combination of pressure, body work, and punching power that accumulates damage so efficiently that opponents simply ran out of the ability to continue. Marcus Browne gone in 2 rounds. Joe Smith Jr., a unified champion who had knocked out multiple contenders, gone in 2 rounds. Alexander Gvozdyk, who entered the fight undefeated and talented, stopped in 10. Anthony Yarde, a puncher who had nearly finished Sergey Kovalev, stopped in 8. The list reads like a demolition record, and yet throughout all of it, Beterbiev remained strangely invisible in the sport's public imagination. In an era obsessed with personality, with social media presence, with pre-fight theater and post-fight celebration, he was almost aggressively silent. He finished his work and went home. And boxing, addicted to spectacle, wasn't always sure what to do with that. The story of how Beterbiev became what he is cannot be told without Montreal, and it cannot be told without Mark Ramsey. After emigrating to Canada, a country with a strong francophone boxing tradition and a serious club scene, Beterbiev connected with Ramsey, one of the most respected trainers in Canadian boxing history. What Ramsey found was not a rough diamond needing cutting. He found something already formed a fighter with elite technique, terrifying power, and a competitive psychology that bordered on the obsessional. What the partnership built was the systematic professional machine. The game plan for every fight followed the same logic. Cut off the ring, establish the jab, go to the body.
Oh, and here comes Rod, saying, I'm going to go for broke, and he scores!
Force the opponent to choose between protecting the ribs and protecting the head, then punish whichever choice they made. It sounds simple. It is not simple. It requires an engine both physical and mental that very few fighters on earth possess. Beterbiev possessed it completely. His personal life remained intensely private. He spoke publicly of his Muslim faith, of his family, of the community he had built in Montreal. He did not trash talk. He did not manufacture drama. When asked about opponents, he answered without cruelty, but also without doubt. He believed he would stop them. He said so with quiet certainty. And then he went out and did exactly that. In a world of boxing promoters selling dreams and personalities, Beterbiev was selling reality. The problem with reality is that it doesn't always trend. Here is where the story becomes genuinely uncomfortable for the sport. In the years between 2019 and 2023, Artur Beterbiev held multiple world championship belts in the light heavyweight division. He was, by almost every objective metric, the most dangerous man in his weight class. And during that period, certain elite names found reasons, promotional conflicts, financial disagreements, mandatory obligations, strategic avoidance to stay away from him. This is not unique to Beterbiev. Boxing's alphabet soup of governing bodies and promotional power structures creates legitimate obstacles to the biggest fights. But in Beterbiev's case, the perception accumulated into something that felt pointed. The man with the 100% knockout rate, the man who had defeated every credible opponent placed in front of him, was not receiving the mainstream treatment his record demanded. Andre Ward had retired before their paths could cross. Sergey Kovalev, once the most feared man in light heavyweight, was past his peak when a potential meeting arose. Dmitry Bivol, the one name that represented a genuine stylistic and talent challenge, was tied to different promotional structures for years, the fight perpetually on the horizon, but never quite arriving. And in that waiting in those years of Beterbiev, fighting mandatory challengers and regional contenders, because the bigger names wouldn't come, something interesting happened. His reputation among hardcore fight fans became almost mythological. People who followed boxing closely spoke about him in a different register than casual fans. The initiated understood what the uninitiated were missing. By 2024, the stars had finally aligned, and the alignment had taken on a weight that felt almost historical. Dmitry Bivol, the WBA light heavyweight champion, the man who had handed Canelo Alvarez his most convincing professional defeat, had survived his own promotional labyrinth and was finally available for the fight that the division demanded. Two unbeaten Russian champions, two former Olympians, two of the most technically complete light heavyweights in the modern era. One fight in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, on October 12, 2024, with the undisputed championship of the world on the line. The build-up was notably free of the manufactured theatre that often surrounds major fights. Beterbiev and Bivol met at press conferences and stared at each other with the calm of two men who had both spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of moment. Neither man pretended not to respect the other. Neither man reached for easy headlines. The seriousness of the occasion seemed to demand a different register, and both fighters delivered it. The stylistic matchup was genuinely fascinating to anyone who understood boxing deeply. Bivol was the movement-based tactician fluid, educated with elite distance management and the ability to box brilliantly off the back foot while still generating real power. Beterbiev was the pressure-based destroyer, slower in terms of foot speed but relentless in forward momentum, with a jab that sets up a right hand that has ended every professional night he has ever started. The question the fight posed was, could Bivol's movement, his angles, his boxing intelligence, neutralize the thing that had neutralized every other man Beterbiev had faced? What unfolded across 12 rounds was as close to a chess match as boxing allows between two men who can genuinely hurt each other. Bivol's movement was excellent, his jab was active, his right hand landed with purpose and found Beterbiev's face multiple times in ways that would have troubled any other opponent. And Beterbiev, for perhaps the first time in his professional career, was genuinely troubled, not hurt in the way his previous opponents had been hurt, but made to think, made to adjust, made to work harder than his record had ever required. But Beterbiev's pressure never stopped. Round after round, he cut down the ring, re-established the center, and landed enough punishing body shots and clubbing right hands to make a genuine claim on the championship. By the middle rounds, both men had landed hard. Both men had had their moments. And the fight was alive in a way that Beterbiev's previous 22 professional rounds combined had rarely been. When the final bell rang and both men stood, the arena held its breath for the scorecards. The judges scored it 115 to 113, 115 to 113 for Beterbiev, with one judge seeing it 114 to 114. A majority decision, close enough that Bivol could feel aggrieved, and indeed he did, calling immediately for a rematch, arguing he had done enough to retain his title. But the championship belts belonged to one man now, all four of them. Artur Beterbiev was the undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world. Undisputed championships in the four-belt era are rare enough that their occurrence carries weight beyond the record books. When Beterbiev unified the division that night in Riyadh, he did so in a manner consistent with everything his career had represented, not easily, not cleanly, but authentically. He had not been gifted a favorable matchup. He had not benefited from a controversial stoppage or a robbery scorecard. He had beaten the second-best light heavyweight in the world in a competitive fight and earned every digit of the result. The question his career leaves the sport with is one that boxing rarely answers honestly. What do we owe fighters who do everything right but don't package themselves for the algorithm? Beterbiev won 18 consecutive professional fights. He did so against credible opposition at increasing levels of quality. He never ducked, never manufactured excuses, never asked for a friendly draw or complained when fights didn't materialize. He trained, he showed up, he finished people, and he left. And the sport gave him, for too long, far less attention than men with worse records and better publicists received. His rematch with Bivol, which was agreed following the first fight, represents the final chapter of his story as an active champion at the highest level. Whatever happens in that fight, the record stands. The percentage holds. The man from Khasavyurt, who learned to box before he learned to smile for cameras, who chose Montreal over Manhattan and discipline over drama, who never once needed a single round to go the distance to prove his point that man built something in professional boxing that almost no one in the sport's history can match. 18 fights, 18 finishes, 3 belts, then 4. A career defined not by noise, but by the relentless, unanswerable logic of the knockout. Artur Beterbiev never needed the world to understand him. He only needed them to be watching when the lights went out. They always were, eventually.